Thank you, Alison, for that introduction. Um, just to explain who I am, so I'm part of the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities from the UK government. So I work with policy colleagues across the UK on our funding streams, and I cover a geography of Scotland, which includes all of the Tay Cities region, along with the northeast of Scotland and central Scotland. A bit about the long-term partnership for towns from a government perspective, and then I'll pass over to Jill, who'll cover off the sort of more of the local arrangements and the council perspective on all of this. But I suppose, first of all, big picture, why is this fund being introduced? It's a kind of neglected area for public policy and for funding the town space. So there's been a lot of focus on cities, but we are seeing a real need for this type of investment for towns. The funding itself is a new way of delivering support. So it's a totally new funding stream. And what it does is it draws on all of the experience that we have from previous funds. It creates a key role for local people in the way that the funding is prioritised and administered, but it also has a key role for the council and for other partners. So the idea is that it kind of captures and makes best use of all of the things that are happening already locally, from the councils and from the community perspective. And the town board, which will be established, that will be run by local people for local people, and it brings together residents, businesses and community leaders in a new way to agree a shared vision for the future of the town. Bit about how it works, who does what. If we go on to the next slide, Jill, sorry. Yep, the town boards themselves will drive the priorities for investment. They'll identify where the powers that are in the policy toolkit can be used to best effect, and they'll steer the long-term vision for the town, working really closely and in conjunction with the local community. The local authority has an important role as the accountable body, and they are responsible for funding and executing the plans. And then the long-term plan itself, which is the kind of product of the board and its vision, is a 10-year strategic plan. So it's quite a high level thing, but it would sort of recognise any good work that's already underway. It would align with the existing strategies and plans and look at how the long-term plan can build on what's already good about Arbroath. Underneath that, there's also a more detailed 3-year investment plan, so a bit more specific, a bit about what will actually be happening. Moving on to the funding, you'll have seen probably local press coverage, etc., about the value of this. So it's a £20 million package, but it's a long-term plan, so it's over 10 years that's delivered. It includes 3 types of funding. So there's a capital aspect. That's 75% of the total. So capital funding is used for physical delivery of interventions. So things like buildings, infrastructure, where there's a kind of tangible output. That's what the capital funding is used for. And then alongside that, there's a revenue funding element or resource funding. So that is used for things like staff costs, running costs. You can use it to pay for sort of training and activities like youth clubs and things like that. And again, that, you know, when I said that we drew on good practice and experience from previous funds, that kind of mix where there's a bit of capital and a bit of revenue that can be used alongside each other seems to be the way that people find most useful for a funding package to be set out. So some places, some funds that just have capital, you can build the building, but then there's no funding there to run it, get it up and running and have it get to a point where it can be self-sustaining. So there's a mix there where the 2 types of funding can be used to complement each other. And then part of the revenue funding also has a capacity aspect. So that's paid really early. Normally, when we agree government funding, it has to be almost unlocked by a process where there's quite a detailed business case that needs to be prepared. The capacity funding comes ahead of all of that, and it's there to help actually develop that plan, and to work up a more detailed approach of how the money will be spent, but recognising that does need to be resourced, and it can be quite resource intensive. There is an upfront payment to cover those costs. The other thing that you've possibly seen in the media coverage is the term endowment style. So what does that actually mean in practice? it just means that this funding isn't the usual kind of use it or lose it, spend it by the end of the financial year or it disappears type of funding. You can carry it forward between years. There's a lot of flexibility in how that can be done. So if you wanted to do a really big project, maybe in years 4 or 5, you can save up a bit of the money from the earlier years and build towards doing a bigger intervention at different times. You can't advance the funding, so you can't say, oh, that's fine, we'll have all our 20 million in year 1, and that'll be the programme done. But you can borrow and you can use the revenue funding to service that borrowing, but it is yeah, the 2 million can only sort of accrue over time. It can't be front loaded. So that's what we mean by endowment style. Coming on to the themes, safety and security, high streets, heritage and regeneration, and transport and connectivity are the themes. They are very broad, so I'll give you some examples of the types of things that can fit under these. There's a full list of interventions in the online guidance, but just to give a bit of a flavour, the safety and security theme can be used to do things like better lighting or extra policing. But it can also deliver interventions that get upstream of safety and security issues. So you can use it for youth diversionary activities, sports clubs, positive interventions to make sure that people don't end up going down that path of antisocial behaviour or crime, try and stop it from happening in the first instance. So a lot of thinking around that, and how actually there's money to tackle issues, but there's also money to prevent them from becoming issues in the first place. Moving on to the High Streets Heritage and Regeneration theme, that's a really broad theme, probably the broadest of the three, but it can cover things like improving the public realm and green spaces, park improvements, facilities like libraries, art galleries. It can include flood defences, and it can also cover costs like running a marketing campaign to attract visitors to the town, restoring a local attraction that has fallen into maybe a bit of disrepair, if it would be a big draw for the town or really enhance quality of life or visitor experience. It can support volunteering projects, either in terms of their facilities or to help run these groups. And it also provides support for local businesses. So as I say, it's really broad, a lot of interventions under that theme. And then transport and connectivity. Some of the interventions there are around building or repairing footpaths or cycle paths. Also bus infrastructure, bus services, road improvements to railway stations. Could be something as simple as setting up an information point in the railway station for people to access information when they arrive in the town, and it can also be used for EV charging. So again, quite a broad range of transport and connectivity related things. When I talk about these interventions, these are the ones that are kind of pre-approved for immediate delivery. So there are a number that have been worked up within the department. They are all worked through in a way that means that there's not a need to develop a detailed business case. If you want to use these interventions, you can simply pick and choose and get on with delivering them. If you want to do something different but that still fits under those themes, there is a way of doing that. It just requires a bit more, I suppose, setup and discussion with government about how and why it's going to work. But there's a real kind of broad flexibility, and actually the list of interventions is so extensive, and I haven't obviously gone through them all, that I think a lot of things could fit under those. I can't think of anything much that wouldn't fit under at least one of the interventions that are already set up. But if there is something, then there is scope to do that. Moving on to then the other support around this. The department here at Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, we've set up a towns unit already. That's up and running and established, and it acts as a cross-cutting hub, working right across government to help with the development of the plans and the implementation of them. We're really keen to make sure that cross-government this works. And that we all pull together in the same direction. That the investment plans will really inform the thinking there in the detail, but there's dedicated support from policy colleagues and of course support from me and my team in the department here. There will also be a task force that will be set up. We haven't done that yet because it is going to work around the implementation of the plans. So until the plans are developed and agreed, we don't need that task force. But once we get to that stage, that's the intention, that a task force will be set up to help with delivery. And I think that's pretty much all I was going to say on this. I'm happy to take questions at the end. I'll pass over to Jill now to talk about some of the things that they're looking for from this from Angus Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. I'm just doing a switch over the slides here. So yes, as Kirsten mentioned, so my name's Jill Patterson. I'm Service Leader for Planning and Sustainable Growth at Angus Council, and I suppose that my presentation this afternoon is not a how-to, it's just lots of ideas and thoughts about anybody that wishes to become chair or the board itself, things that you might want to think about in terms of how that board might operate. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an overview. What might a town board look like? What type of things might the town board need to take into account? What support is available from council officers, and also the wider network that council officers are involved in? If there's one word you take away from today, it's going to be about the importance of engagement. So the town board is a small grouping of people in a big community of Arbroath, and it's important to get a really cross-representative group of people involved in the process. So I'll talk again some ideas and thoughts around that. Oh, sorry, just bear with me a second. My colleague Audrey's just reminded me I'm not sharing my slides, so 2 secs. Hopefully that's all them now. So yeah, just talking through engagement. The next one is really around vision and leverage, and I'll cover that when I get to that particular point in the slide, and then to come on to the investment plan. So the town board, what might it look like? What type of things might the town board need to take into account in terms of governance? So I've got a question mark there. It's not our town board. There's no council officers sit on the board. The UK government guidance is quite clear about the makeup of the proposed board. But I wanted to start with relationships. So the relationship between the town board and also the council, and also the wider community planning partnerships such as third sector, police, fire, etc. All the different agencies that work in a particular place. And I think it's something for the board to think about. How closely do they want to work alongside these different groupings or otherwise? We've got quite a lot of support, and I'll touch on the support in the early stages. Equally, the board might say, actually, we want a really light touch approach. Generally, a lot of things come back to the council at some point. So I think it's really a good opportunity to really build up a good working relationship with parties as the town board develops. But equally, you all might say, we're fed up with Angus Council, we don't want to work with you at all, and we'll do our own thing. The organisation and governance structure. So I think what's really important for the board is once we've got the members appointed to that particular board, how do you want to organise yourselves on the board? Is there particular skill sets that you might be looking for in that context? Potentially some finance skills, project management, etc. And how does that board want to kind of manage its ongoing governance? How often does it want to meet? What is the structure and roles and responsibilities as part of that, which I'll touch on in a minute. I think in those discussions, it's really important that that board has a terms of reference that really sets the benchmark for how the board is going to operate. And that might take a little while just to develop and pan out, and a bit of engagement around just really defining that. And it might change throughout the process. Part of our discussions have been, the board might look quite different at the outset than it might be once you get into the delivery mode. So it might be different skill sets that you're looking at in that context. I mentioned roles and responsibilities. I think the board needs to be really clear about what is everybody's defined roles within that board, being quite clear about those and setting those out at the outset. And as again, just reviewing those on a regular basis to make sure they're relevant as to how that board's going to operate on an ongoing basis. I'll talk about communications and engagement in a minute, but I think really, the early part of that is going to be developing the vision that underpins the whole of the long-term investment plan, the plan itself. What's the vision for Arbroath? How does the board come together to really draw on that engagement and communications to really develop that vision that will start to underpin some of the projects? 20 million sounds a lot, it's a lot, but it's not a lot, if you know what I mean. And there could be an awful lot of asks on that particular sum of money. So it's important, I think, to have a really strong, clear vision. Fundamental to everything is communications and engagement. How is the board going to communicate on a regular basis with the wider community of Arbroath? And how is that board going to support engagement with a really wide cross-representative group of different stakeholders in Arbroath? It's natural, loads of people are going to come to the table with their pet project. I want my project funded, and it's going to be fundamentally important that how that board engages across a wide range of different groups and encourages people to think about helping to shape that vision that will underpin projects going forward, because it won't be possible to have everything funded. Also important to that is communication. So how are the board going to update the wider community as to what they've been doing, what the decision making is, what are the next steps, how they're going to work on an ongoing basis, and what are the best tools for engaging with people? Is it just going to be online means? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be hard copy information? How is the board going to communicate what it's been up to? Again, it's important to define a clear function for the board. So we talked about roles and responsibilities. What is the function of that particular board, and that broader engagement needs to be looked at as well. Kirsten in her presentation talked about the 3-year investment plan, and beneath that will actually be the delivery and action plan. So what are all the different steps and things that need to be gone through to actually develop a really clear delivery plan, so that everybody's clear about who's doing what in terms of delivery and how that sits within the context of the 3-year investment plan. How are you ensuring that you're delivering on the priorities and principles that are set out in the 3-year investment plan? I popped the word prospectus in there. Quite often in Angus, I live in Angus, everybody tells you what's wrong, nobody tells you what's fantastic about the place that they live. And wouldn't it be fantastic, as part of this exercise, we end up with a fantastic prospectus for Arbroath? What's fantastic about Arbroath? What are the opportunities? And what is a really strong vision that everybody is behind? Well, I say everybody, but as many people as you can keep happy in a vision, to really put Arbroath in that kind of really joined up vision for that particular place. And last, probably but not the least, is really sitting around how the board might want to think about performance and reporting. So I mentioned the communication. What are you going to be updating people on? What's gone well? What's not gone so well? How are you going to be reporting on delivery? How are you going to be reporting on when things have happened? What's the next stages of that? And reflecting that, and probably self-evaluating and reviewing how the board's operating, because 10 years is a long time, so it's continually going through that particular part of the process. So just in terms of the level of support that might be available to support the board, so as part of the initial round of capacity building money, and Kirsten mentioned that in her slide, so there's a £50,000 comes to Angus Council to help set up the board, and we're in the process of pulling together a resource that is to work with the board to help in that formation of the board, to help in those early stages of developing the long-term plan and also the 3-year investment plan. Between now and November is not a long period of time, so there will be resource available that's dedicated to working with that board, and the board might turn around after that short while and say, thanks very much, we're all set up, we're up and running, and actually we don't need that resource anymore, and that is perfectly fine. Equally, as Kirsten said, that the next tranche of the 200,000 capacity building money, the board might say, actually, we've got some ideas about how we'd like to use that resource going forward. So there's quite a lot of support from a cross-section of council officers to help with that, and we've got teams of officers in the council who have got quite a lot of experience in terms of that local governance models and shaping those, and also some of the types of projects that will be able to give a really good steer on some of the challenges that are maybe in relation to those and some of the opportunities as well. But by no means we're there to tell the board what to do. We're there as much or as little as you want us to be there as part of that process. The council officers as well have a wide network of different groups that they're involved in. So again, we're there to support the board in bringing in perhaps some examples from elsewhere. So Kirsten mentioned in her presentation, they have the kind of UK-wide hub network. Officers here have some local examples and also some wider afield about regeneration projects or towns that have already maybe got a board in place. What are some of the challenges and opportunities and that they've faced, and we could support to bring in some case studies for that. I popped this one in just because one of my colleagues on the call probably uses this phrase quite a lot. Start with what's strong about a place and not what's wrong. And there's been an awful lot of studies, activity, etc. that's happened in Arbroath. And I think it'll be important for the board to have a think about what things that people have told us already, what projects have we already looked at, what's all the information that we have about Arbroath, and probably underpinning that as well as a lot of baseline information. So again, officers within some of my teams have looked at really simplifying that complex world of getting drowned in data into a series of different themes, and I've popped them up there just around some of the things that the board might actually say, we'd really like some information and data in relation to that. Is that something within the council you could support us with, or is that somebody on the board who maybe has a contact to pull that information together? So I think my sort of question to pose to the board is have a wee think about who's all working in and around Arbroath. What sort of information do they have to help us get a good steer on bringing that all together to move forward? If there's one thing to take away from today, it's going to be the importance of that board and how they engage with the wider community of Arbroath and how they get a really strong cross-representative of different groups, different demographics, different backgrounds involved in that process. It can't just be a couple of online surveys or drop-in events. How is the board going to work to undertake a series of engagement events, a series of workshops to really get everybody quite enthused about this fantastic opportunity for Arbroath, but also to try and get them to think, actually, how can we all work together as opposed to just coming to the table maybe with the project and there'll be a little bit of conflict in that. So it's really to think, what are all the different community sectors? So there's business, there's tourists, there's the people that live in Arbroath, there's a different, there's maybe culture and sport, there's a whole load of people from different backgrounds. So really fundamentally important to the board is going to be how they engage them in terms of developing that vision, long-term plan and investment plan. I also popped a little bit on there, and again, it's just something for the board to think about. So there's something called participatory budgeting. Now, that is not us saying we've got 20 million, let's just let everybody vote on it, because quite often what happens is you get the popularity contest, who's the best at campaigning gets their project funded, maybe rather than the best project. But what could be an opportunity for the board is to develop in conjunction with the communities, maybe a long list of 10 different ideas, and work those up and then say, actually, they're all really good, or 5 of them are really good. Why don't we put those out to a public vote? And that is effectively participatory budgeting. So there's some support again and skills within the council to help if that was something that might be of interest to the board. So Kirsten just mentioned the importance of the long-term plan and the focus in on the 3 investment themes and outlined that I think I had to look at the guidance. You'd struggle to find a project that probably doesn't fit under one of those 3 investment themes, but it's important that that moves forward, and as I say, that investment plan is in place. So again, just some ideas for thought around developing that vision for Arbroath. Think big. It's quite a big sum of money, but also 10 years is a long time. And can you maximise that 20 million? So think about leverage. can you use that as match funding for securing other external funding that you may want to do? And Kirsten also touched on the potential use of borrowing as well within that context. So Kirsten actually used this phrase last week. Wouldn't it be disappointing if we got to the end of the process and we'd only spent 20 million? Because that's a fantastic opportunity to actually use that as leverage for securing additional funds. Now, I think, again, something for the board to think about is you might have some projects that get developed through the course of the next little while, and there's an external funding grant fund that might actually fund that project in its entirety, that again could sit alongside the 20 million rather than jumping on the first project. Oh, great, we're off and we're funding it. Again, thinking about those opportunities to maximise that. I popped the phrase in, think big, because I think I use the phrase, sometimes you get paid at the end of the month and there's that burning desire in your pocket to go and spend money quite quickly and do projects that are quick wins. They're great, and you want, I suppose, from a board's point of view, they think actually it might be nice to get a few of those type of projects, but actually your 20 million could start to fritter away quite quickly if you start doing lots of those types of projects. So there's a real opportunity here to think, actually, is there something really big in Arbroath that could make a really big difference to the town that might take us a few years to work up, but there's an opportunity to do that alongside some of those quick win projects as well. And the importance of an action plan. So again, thinking about what are all the different steps and processes that need to be gone through to deliver a project. Kirsten mentioned the revenue funding and the capacity building money there. So there might be technical studies that are required, there might be land valuations, there might be technical assessments needed. So having a think about how you get from A to B. We've got a really good idea. What are all the practical steps and what are all the stages that we need to go through to get that delivered, and how are we going to be able to do that? So that's where your action plan comes in, is who's doing what, how's that going to work. Some things might end up as a dead end. Actually, we pursued that and actually we couldn't quite get there. So it'll be really twin tracking different things in that process. And that's me. They were just food for thought for anybody, as I say, thinking about potentially putting themselves forward for the board or the chair, or actually just being involved, because it's going to be important that there's a wide range of people involved in this particular process.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you. Just to clarify the slides, I believe we're going to put them up on our web page. Is that right? I'm looking to Audrey and Jill just to. Yep, they're nodding. So it will be on the council's web page.